I'm Gen X. I grew up with, you just got into trouble. You were sent to your room. You didn't talk about your emotions and feelings. You buried your head in the sand story. And that's not healthy, because those are real things that happen. You as a parent may think that child sibling taking your toy, that's just, don't be selfish. Let them play with your toy. That may not mean anything to you, but for that child, it means something.
Hey guys, welcome back to the Digest This podcast. I'm your host, Bethany Cameron, and today we have Dr. Caroline Leaf. She is the leading expert in mental and emotional issues such as ADD, ADHD, autism, anxiety, and depression in adults and children. And she's here today to discuss her 19th book, How to Help Your Child Clean Up Their Mental Mess. It just released, and I'm so excited for you guys to hear this episode. We dive into how to help your child with emotional issues, how to manage them as a parent, and fundamentals to help with back to school changes. Even if you don't have children, this episode is full of helpful tips we can all benefit from. So be sure to share it with a parent you feel would enjoy it. And without further ado, let's take a listen. But before we get into this episode, shout out to podcast user president.kl. They wrote, absolutely love these podcasts. Bethany is wonderful and informs me so much. And it's what I love about these podcasts. I never enjoyed podcasts this much. I listen to her podcast throughout the day, all day, and recommend it to everyone. Absolutely amazing. Can't wait for another episode. Wow. Thank you so much for that wonderful and kind review, and especially since you're not typically a podcast listener. So that is truly grateful. And I'm so honored to be the podcast that you do listen to. And thank you to everyone who goes and rates and review the podcast. It truly does help the show grow and get out into more ears. So thanks again. If you haven't done so, it takes about 2 seconds to give it a rating and review. And you know that I truly do appreciate it. Hey guys, quick pause. Before I go any further into this episode, I want to address mental health. As someone who has suffered with anxiety and depression at 2 different stages in my life, I can truly relate to anyone going through either or both. When I was in my late teens, I struggled with depression pretty badly, and I was even put on antidepressants for a short period, of which honestly didn't help one bit. Now, I'm not saying antidepressants can't help others, but for me, it didn't. And even if they did, I knew I didn't want to be on meds forever and needed to get to the root cause, not just put a Band-Aid on it. So I went to therapy, which truly helped. I also more recently experienced a huge month-long anxiety attack. This was right after I moved. I had just sold my condo. I moved and bought a house and remodeled my kitchen, all while trying to keep my business running and living out of a suitcase with everything in storage. The anxiety truly got so bad, it paralyzed me in bed for literally a month with neuropathy symptoms. If you guys were following me on Instagram during that time, I did share a little bit about what I was going through, and it was, thankfully I'm over it now, but it was just a really hard time for me. I even had a heart monitor on my chest for a few weeks. And if you go back on my Instagram reels and photos, you can even see it on me. This was again back in 2021. I had no idea what was happening, and I went to specialists and even had brain scans to rule out tumors and cancer. I did blood work, and pretty much every scan test, nerve test was checked out thoroughly. Everything came back normal, thankfully, right? But I was still experiencing symptoms. The specialists determined it was anxiety and recommended therapy. I thought there was no way anxiety could bring on these intense physical symptoms, but I ended up seeing a therapist, and to my amazement, it actually worked. Over time, I was able to get things out that I didn't even know were bottled up inside me from the stress of life, moving, work, and the pandemic that I fully never dealt with. Now, I'm sharing all this because I truly believe therapy can help those suffering with anxiety and depression, and believe everyone should have access to it. And if you haven't heard about my sponsor, BetterHelp, they offer online therapy with licensed therapists specialized in vast areas to suit your specific needs. They even offer couples therapy as well as teens therapy. And the best part is that you don't have to leave your home, take time off work, or find a babysitter to get help. You can do everything online right in the comfort of your own home. Plus, if for whatever reason you're not jiving with your therapist, you can always switch. So you're not locked in with someone you're not meshing with. You don't even have to have a video call. BetterHelp offers different ways to communicate with your therapist via phone calls only, video chat, and even messages, which you can message them 24/7 without needing to schedule. I can't stress enough about how much therapy can help with your mental health. And mental health is perhaps our most important part of our health journey. So if you want to try BetterHelp, you can get 10% off your first month if you go to betterhelp.com/digest. Again, that's betterhelp.com/digest to get 10% off your first month. betterhelp.com/digest. So I'm kind of excited to announce this. Every month, I'm going to be giving away quality items that I personally love to several of my podcast listeners that simply give the show a rating and review. That's all you have to do to qualify to win. And for the month of August, I'm giving away sets of Yo Mama's keto certified condiments like ketchup, hot sauces, and they're all natural, low carb, low sugar pasta sauces made with simple, minimal ingredients. These sauces are low sodium, contain no added sugar, and are made with healthy olive oil and fresh tomatoes, and no citric acid. Yo Mama's is a company that produces their sauces in small batches, which I absolutely love. And I know you'll love them too. So 3 of my listeners will receive $65 worth of quality sauce. That's $65 worth of sauce. And all you have to do to enter is just rate and review this podcast. And I will be reaching out to you on Instagram if chosen. So be sure you leave your IG handle in your review. Good luck. Thank you so much, Caroline, for coming on the show today. It is an honor.
Thank you, Bethany. It's great to talk to you. I'm excited.
Yeah. So, first of all, I mean, you are just a wealth of knowledge, and your new book, How to Help Your Child Clean Up Their Mental Mess, is now available. And first of all, 1 in 6 children ages 2 to 8 probably, I mean, I'm getting this from statistics, but I'm thinking it's more now, but older statistics, ages 2 to 8 have had been diagnosed with a mental behavior or developmental disorder. Now, again, this may even be larger. 1 in 6 children. What is your take on that, and what research have you accumulated?
Well, that's as you say, the statistic. That statistic is horrific. There's for sure a mental health crisis, but Bethany, we almost have to take a step back and ask ourselves a big question, and that is, why is there a mental health crisis with children, with adults as well? But it's when they do the global surveys, what they see is that for years, adults always did worse on those surveys when it came to mental health than children, but now it's swapped. So we have to look at what is going on. And there's a lot of factors here, because if we have a system in place for mental health, which we have, and if it's working, shouldn't things be getting better, not worse? And if we actually track over the last 40 years, we see that things have got worse, not just with children, but it's with adults as well. And that means that the systems that we are, that we are using are not working very well. So that statistic that you quote, you can there's so many different versions of that statistic, but pretty much they're all saying the same thing. Things are really bad. So that means we have to stand back and take a look at ourselves, because I don't think that there is a crisis in mental health in the way that they're describing it. And that is that there's more people with mental illness, there's more children with mental illness, because that's the languaging that's being used, more children with mental illness. That's what they mean when they say mental health is in a crisis. That means that more people are mentally sick. There's more things wrong with their brain. That is not the right way of looking at it. What we have is a change in people's mental health status, definitely worse, not because there's more illness, but because there's bad management of mind. So if we don't teach our children how to process life, how to have the tools to tell their story, if we don't have it helping, they're going to grow into adulthood with issues. You can't suppress stuff. If you don't teach an adult or help an adult suppress stuff, you know enough in the field what it does to your gut issues and all that kind of thing. So the crisis, I believe, is in how we manage our minds and how we're teaching our kids to manage our mind. And if you don't have a way of processing, it will increase mental health issues. And there is a link, which you know very well from the work you do, between chronic unmanaged stress and physical problems. We also know that if you don't deal with early childhood issues, it's going to result in physical issues as an adult. And gut issues are one of the first areas to often get hit. And, so that's my take on it, that it's a mind management crisis versus that is now this mental illness. It doesn't make sense. How can you suddenly have more people mentally ill if the cause is in the brain? That means that there's something radically wrong with the brain now that's different to what it was before. We have to look at what are we doing as terms of lifestyle factors. What if we change in terms of how we're helping people manage their minds? That's resulted in people feeling like they aren't mentally in a comfortable place.
You're saying that managing is lacking in our society today rather than there's more, quote, issues. Now, but what do you think about the more technology that we have today? Because there's more technology, there's less time with friends that people are getting because they're just on their phones and isolated. And what about the diet of society? And that is causing a factor in our brains and the way we think, and anxiety and things like that. What's your take on that?
So what you've just said is literally confirming the point that this is such a great question that you raised, and it's confirming the point that I made. You brought up societal factors, you brought up environment. So in other words, environmental changes and nurturing whatever we're exposed to, because it's not about us, it's about us in the environment. So our environment affects us. So if our environment is affecting us, then the cause is in the environment, not in the brain. The current biomedical model is saying that a child has ADHD or an adult has ADHD or bipolar or schizophrenia or general anxiety, whatever diagnosis they get, the implication is that it's because they've got chemical imbalance or they've got which is not correct science anyway. So in other words, the point is that the environment does influence us. So if someone is battling with behavioral issues or something, or depression or whatever, we've got to look to the environment. We can't look to the brain as the cause. We can look at the impact on the brain, for sure. And then there's a feedback loop set up. We can look at the impact on the brain and the body, which sets up the feedback loop, but we've got to look for the cause. So when you help a person, just to try and aim something at fixing the brain is missing the point. It's the environment we have to look at. So coming back to social media, absolutely, social media is affecting us. There's so much written about that and so much discussed about that. But I don't think social media is the problem. It's not social media that's the problem. It's how we're managing social media. Key issue. It's not AI that's the problem. It's how we're managing AI. It's not that, we do know that the isolation over COVID was a huge problem, but what do we do now to manage that? In terms of loss of education, isolation, all those distortions of our realities that occurred over that time period. So to just add a diagnosis to people and saying, oh, there's an increase in mental health, we have to look at the environment, COVID, social media. How are we managing that? So we should be focusing our energy on teaching people the skills of how do I manage these things versus, oh, you have this wrong with you, and let's now give you a diagnosis and a medication for treatment. That's the wrong approach. It's first of all, let's address the individual within the environment and let's help them manage that process. Telling a child don't go on social media, or go on social media less. Those are skills towards mind management. But if it's a rule and it's bad for you and it's seen like that, that just makes a problem more of a problem, and it's not teaching. But if you say social media is great, it's fantastic, it's done so many good things, but if you go on it too long, this is what it does in your brain. If you keep scrolling through and seeing these curated lives, it's going to affect you, like we see with the contagion that occurs with young girls. Very bad, particularly at the moment with the whole body contagion thing and the so-called perfect body or cutting, and these things because of the nature of social media, contagion can happen very quickly. Therefore, mind management of teaching children about social media, about AI, etc. That's what we are not doing enough of.
Yeah, well, you bring up a great point, is that it's good to know the consequences and to tell your children, hey, look, these are the consequences. Just like, hey, it's great to cook, but these are the consequences if you burn your hand on a stove. So you don't want to do that. So to be aware of that, just like going on social media, hey, look, if you're on it too long, just like you said, this and that is going to happen. And if someone knows that, they're going to be conscious of that and kind of reel it back in and not be on so long.
Absolutely.
Very good point. Now, what other ways can we manage or actually help our children manage? Because if they're starting at such a young age, if anxiety, depression is happening in people as young as 5 years old, then you're thinking, what's going to happen to the rest of their life and how can you set them up for success?
Brilliant question, because if you think about it, not only are children being diagnosed at 5, they're actually being diagnosed at 2. Children as young as 2 are being diagnosed with bipolar depression, or pediatric bipolar depression, which is literally insane. I mean, the United States is mainly doing that, and the rest of the world are finding that, UK and those kind of places that are a little bit more advanced when it comes to looking at a holistic approach to mental health, can't believe that people would diagnose a child with pediatric bipolar depression at 2. It doesn't make sense. And that's because we've got to look at the definition. So the first thing to help ourselves, to help parents, to help children, is to get educated and understand what are we actually dealing with here? Because there's a lot of blurred lines that are occurring. Mental health has become this big umbrella term for a lot of different things. And we need to actually kind of break it down, because if you take this umbrella concept of mental health and you pop it under the biomedical model, which is what's happened, then it becomes a set of symptoms to be diagnosed, assuming an underlying biological cause, and then treated with a medication, which works if you've got diabetes. It works to a certain extent if you've got gut issues. But even then, as you know yourself, it requires a holistic approach to we can't just always give a medication. So the first thing is to really educate our children and ourselves that we've got to stop medicalizing misery, that we've got to stop pathologizing childhood, that we've got to stop seeing anxiety and depression as bad for you. Anxiety and depression are not bad for you. And the easiest way to understand this is to think of a scale. Those old-fashioned scales that have got one little thing over here and one thing over there, and then you've got your little balancing thing in the middle, and you put your little weights in, and it does this. Think of your emotions or life experiences in these two scales. But let's just focus in on one aspect. Let's focus in on emotions, feelings. So depression and anxiety, because depression and anxiety aren't illnesses. They're actually feelings. You feel depressed. You feel anxious. Now, depression and anxiety are actually, as I mentioned, good for you. So if they're in the scale and the scale's balanced, that means that little bit of depression is a bit of information. If I focus on that and say, okay, why am I feeling depressed? Or why am I feeling a little anxious? Or why am I feeling a bit envious or frustrated? If I evaluate that and say, okay, this is normal, but there's a reason for it. I'm having a normal response. Then I can see the information that depression and anxiety is attached to, versus seeing it as a symptom of a disease. Very different, two completely different perspectives. So if I see it that way, then I can actually say, okay, well, let me, where am I feeling this depression in my body? Maybe in my gut. How is it affecting my behaviors? Maybe I'm getting a little bit withdrawn. How's it affecting how I view life? Well, maybe I'm seeing that life's a little bit, it's a little bit not so great at the moment. I can start going through a process of then asking myself why I feel, why I'm having this association between my emotions and behaviors and bodily sensation and the way I look at life. And I can go through a sort of cycle of evaluation, and you can teach obviously you simplify, but you can teach children as young as 2 to do this. I did that in my practice for years. I practiced for 25 years, and my own kids are all adults now, but thousands of children, we've taught this from the age of, in various different settings, from the age of 2. But what we want to do is not just see that as a set of symptoms. You want to say, I'm showing up with this depression and et cetera, because of, there's a because of my child showing up in this different way because of, it's not who they are. It's not who you are. It's because of something in your environment, maybe too much social media, maybe bullying at school, maybe problems with a spouse, maybe problems with whatever,
Right. Yeah.
challenge us on a scale of 1 to 10. So that's a really important starting point, Bethany. And from there, you educate people, define this, help parents, train a parent. The best person to help, the best way to help a child is to help the parent to understand this distinction and how to help themselves. And then you model that for your child. Because children read body language. Children are incredibly insightful, and they really respect and honor authenticity. And although they may not verbalize it like I'm verbalizing it, they can pick up when something's not authentic, when you're suppressing something, or when you don't explain something, or if a child is going through an experience and they're being told, stop doing that, or stop crying, or stop being naughty, or, this is a problem, and you're off to the doctor and you're labeling, which is the kind of what happens so much. And I'm not blaming any parent. It's what the environment that we are living in currently today is telling the parent. If your child does this, this, and this, get them straight to that psychiatrist, get them on that medication. That's the right thing to do. But we have to ask ourselves, is that the right thing to do? Because it's not making things better, it's making things worse.
So you're just putting a Band-Aid.
A Band-Aid. We've got to stop pathologizing childhood. We've got to allow our children to feel that depression. If you lose a pet, or your best friend leaves school, of course you're going to be sad. If you're going back to school and there's new teachers, or you're going to a new school, or there's something new that's changed in your environment, or your parents are going through issues or something like that, of course anxiety is a normal response. If you're being teased or something, those are normal responses. So if it's not dealt with, obviously it gets bigger. And then if it gets bigger, the scales tip. So now the anxiety is now tipping the scale. So now it's shifted from working for you and keeping you balanced and empathic and insightful to one of, oh gosh, it's getting too much. It's becoming weighty. It's dropping down and it's dragging you into a deeper level. That's still not a mental illness. That is unmanaged anxiety that just gets worse and worse and becomes this buildup of energy that manifests in how a person is showing up in their behaviors and so on.
Yeah, well, I want to dig into how to help your child manage their anxiety and depression. But before we do, what should we be looking for? Like, what are 4 signals to watch out for in your children? How can you distinguish if they are going through a hard time, and how to go about that?
It's a great way to begin, and it's simple. Because when you look at your child and all the things of life are happening, can be so overwhelming. So the 4 signals tell us information, and the 4 categories of signals are emotions. So what are they feeling? What are you feeling? What are they? You'd ask them what they're feeling, or just observe them. Their emotions, they seem sad or they seem angry. You can observe and name it, but you can also teach them to say, how are you feeling? So it works both ways. You can also say how you are feeling. Okay, so then the second one is behaviors, which is what you say, what you do, how you say it, and how you do it. Emotions never live alone. These 4 signals I'm identifying now, which is what you look for, always work together. So when we all understand looking for an emotion. Emotion is a signal, but now how is that emotion showing up, linked to their behavior? What are they saying? What are they doing? How are they saying it? How are they doing it? In other words, maybe they're not talking much. Maybe when they do talk, it's very they're very irritable, or they're very withdrawn. So there's something that's different. Then the third signal is, what are they physically complaining about? When you notice that they are suddenly complaining of a lot of headaches, or a lot of gut ache, or a lot of whatever. So there's this, maybe they constantly don't want to go to school. They keep saying that, they keep saying my tummy's sore. Where is it showing up in the body? And you can teach a child, if they feel sad, you can say, well, where does that feel sore in your body? And children are really good. They'll show you. They'll say, my heart's jumping, or my body wants to jump, or they'll say something that describes that something's disrupted in their physiology. And that's because the experience that they're having isn't just in the mind. It's in the mind and the brain and the body. It's in 3 places. Then the 4th signal is their perspective, attitude, the lens that they're looking at life. How are they showing up today? So let's say that they always love to go to the park and play with their friends. And now suddenly they do not want to go to the park, or they always wanted to go. They're very happy to go to their special friend's house or to play with them. And now suddenly they're very wary of that special friend. There's a wariness. So there's a perspective that's shifted. There's an attitude that's perspective. Maybe they always loved going to school. Now they don't like going to school. And those are 4 categories that you can easily memorize. And I explain it really simplistically in the book, How to Help Your Child Clean Up the Mental Mess. I explain it very simplistically, and I give you ways of making it very simple for the child. So I've created, I'm sure you saw Bethany in the book, I've created a character called Brainy. We've even got a little toy that a little soft toy that
so cute.
It is so cute that you can order if you're interested to, because children relate so well to toys. And we have a coloring book just that's got Brainy and friends, and kids can color in, because when you get kids coloring in and interacting, they're going to share that activity helps bring things out, that sort of writing, etc. So in the book, this character he walks the mental health journey with you, and you can teach kids to say, if you're feeling sad, show me the picture of how you feel by looking at Brainy. So the book's full of the cartoon character teaching you how to help your child learn these tools and learn the system that I've developed called the neurocycle. And if a child is still 2-year-old, 3-year-old, they don't really have the words to be able to say, hey, this one bullied me at school and now I'm really scared to go to school. That is hard for them to say. But if you've created an environment where they can, they know that if they're feeling something's not right and they can't have it verbalized, they can go pick up Brainy and bring Brainy to you and make Brainy cry. They might demonstrate, they may say, Brainy's crying, Brainy's sad.
Yeah. For those that can't see you, because a lot of people are listening here, Brainy, she's showing it to me here, and it's a stuffed animal, or excuse me, not stuffed animal, but it's a stuffed, it's a character, right? And
it's got a little brain head.
It's a brain head. Yeah, it's
face and
it's so cute, you guys. And I think it's a great tool for your child to have to be able to help and express what they're feeling.
Exactly. And Bethany, that's the thing. Children need ways to be able to express the energy that builds up, because everything that we experience it's like me talking now. This is electromagnetic light waves and sound waves. That's energy. Every experience, that bullying at school, is a bunch of energy that goes into the brain and becomes memories that group together. And if it's toxic, it creates toxic energy, and the kids don't know what to do with it. So it comes out in maybe a tantrum, maybe whatever behavioral issue, it comes out in those 4 signals. So that's why when you asked a great question a few moments ago about what are the 4 things you can look out for, those signals, as you're looking for those signals, you can also teach the child to be able to come to you by, picking up a character like Brainy, or pointing in the book, or picking up any toys. So basically what works really well is if you designate an area in your house to teach this to your children, and make an area in your house that's maybe Brainy, the safe Brainy area, or the mind area, or the brain area, or the neurocycle, whatever word you and your kids work out. That's where you go. It's the safe space where your husband or wife, partner, whatever, your child, whenever you're feeling something's affecting you and you just need time to process it, you go to that space in the house. And it could be a beautiful little chair with a box of the toys, and a wall that you've maybe painted with chalk, that chalk paint, so you can actually write on the wall, because one of the steps is writing and drawing and so on. In the steps that once you identify the 4 signals, you then follow that up with 4 more steps. It's 5 steps in total. But having a designated area helps a child to associate. If I'm feeling sad, I can't get my words out, I've got all this energy in me. If I go there, I'm safe. If I go to that place in my house, I know that someone is going to come and sit with me, my mother or whoever is going to come and sit with me, so that I can talk. And as it will work this out and solve this problem. And that helps the child's identity and self-value stay intact, because very often if a child's performing and carrying on and being difficult, we're busy, whatever, we'll turn around and say, stop crying, go to your room. And that's creating an invalidation without us intentionally trying to do it. Obviously, they're not trying to do that, but that invalidates what the child's experience is. For them, they don't know what to do with that energy, so it's coming out in those emotions. So if they can go to a place and you can say, sit there, and they can pick up a toy and they can make Brainy cry, or you can say when they sit there, oh, I see that you are crying. I see that you are rubbing your eyes. I see that you are very sad today. I see that you don't want to eat your lunch. you can identify, I wonder what's happening, and you can actually identify and work through that process with them. So that's kind of, that we start with the signals and then have a designated place. That's how you can start helping a child and yourself to be able to process this, what they're going through. So simple, but so powerful.
Anxiety, insomnia affect nearly 70 million Americans every year. And research suggests sleep deprivation can actually cause anxiety disorders. But also, anxiety can cause sleep disorders. It's like the chicken or the egg, and it's a vicious cycle. I've personally struggled with both to the point where I was seriously contemplating medication. But before giving in to meds, I opted to try CBD, specifically NEDS. NED's full spectrum CBD tincture is certified 100% organic, it's outdoor grown, and cold extracted, which means no harmful pesticides or chemicals are involved in the growing or extraction process, creating a pure, highly effective tincture full of all the cannabinoids without making you high. NED has been a part of my life for over 2 years strong because 1, it actually helps, and 2, NED is fully transparent about everything that goes into all their products. They do third-party lab testing in every batch and number each batch sold. Their slow cold extraction process does take more time than other CBD companies, and they know that they may not be producing as much as fast as the other guys. But I personally prefer that over other brands that just want to pump out product left and right. That's what makes NED truly different from all the rest. That's why I highly recommend NED for anyone suffering with anxiety or sleep deprivation. It truly does work. Become the best version of yourself and get 15% off NED products with code DIGEST. Go to helloned.com/digest or enter code DIGEST at checkout. That's helloned.com/digest. HELLONED.com/digest and get 15% off. Thank you, NED, for sponsoring this part of the show and offering my listeners a natural remedy for some of life's most common health issues. For anyone that loves chocolate and peanut butter, I have to tell you about Reese's Peanut Butter Cups. Okay, do I have your attention? I bet you thought this was an ad for them, right? On the contrary, but I actually created my very own limited edition spin-off version of them, and you can now purchase them for a limited time because there were only limited quantities made. These peanut-free chocolate cups are paleo, keto, and vegan. They're organic certified and contain absolutely zero sugar or sugar substitutes in the ingredient list. Just 4 simple organic ingredients made from pure cacao, cacao butter, freshly ground coconut, and cashew butter. There's only 1 gram of sugar in these that naturally occurs in the cashews. There's even 3 grams of fiber per chocolate cup to help feed the good bacteria in your gut. And the compounds in pure quality unsweetened chocolate have actually been shown to help with gut health and the probiotics in your belly to thrive. I wanted to create something that's never been created, offered, or on the market before for everyone looking for a better nut butter chocolate cup alternative that's free from peanuts, sugar alcohols, flavorings, emulsifiers, or fillers. And now there's finally something out there that exists. These won't last long, so go to eatingevolved.com/lilsipper to grab a box or 2 or 3. Again, that's eatingevolved.com/lilsipper, or you can click the link in today's show notes for one easy tap that will take you straight to the page. I hope you guys love these as much as I do. I mean, you have great points, and to have a tool to do that and help your child explain to you is brilliant, Caroline. And really just addressing the issue, because I feel like I don't want to say, I'm not blaming any kind of parent, but I know parents are busy, this, that, and the other. And sometimes the child will cry, and, they'll just sit in front of the TV and just say, hey, sit there for a little bit and, just let it out or whatever. And then when the child grows up, I feel like a lot of our childhood habits do get carried on into adulthood. And so then what happens when you're an adult? Something happens and you're just going to seclude yourself and sit in front of the TV because that's what you did when you were a child and you never addressed it. So really just addressing it and knowing how to manage, as you have stated, is a key in adolescence. And, children, as young as 2 can even start this. So we have the 4 things to look for, which is emotions, behaviors, what they're complaining about, and their perspective, and if their attitude has changed towards something that is not typical. Now, can you share a little bit more about how to self-encourage your child and how to strengthen their mind, as far as I feel like a lot of children are just not encouraged enough, and how to navigate through that?
So, great question too. So basically, to encourage your child, you want to be able to help them to express what they're going through and to identify when something, is happening, if it's scary or things didn't work out quite how they expected it to, or maybe someone's not so nice to them at school. Things happen. You want to encourage your child to be curious about you want them to be curious, but you also want them to know how to deal with what happens inside of them when something like that happens. And then in that way, you build resilience. So when we talk about building the mind, we're talking about building resilience. So the neurocycle that I have developed is basically how the mind, brain, and body, which are 3 separate things, but they work together, how they work. Now, our mind, brain, body network is how life gets into us. And then we show up with our mind, brain, and body collectively. So, experiences come in, they wire into our mind as like a gravitational field, into our brain as a little tree-looking structure made of proteins, but like the tree that is behind you, but people can imagine trees, any tree, that's kind of what it looks like in the brain. And in the body, that experience goes in slightly differently to the brain, but it goes in every cell of our body. So if you think of an experience as being embodied in the mind, brain, body network, then it makes sense that if something is very overwhelming or scary or traumatic, the entire mind, brain, body network is impacted. And that if we don't teach them to manage it, we basically mask the resilience. We have a natural resilience as humans, but we've got to unmask and we've got to develop. So to make a child's mind strong, what we're doing is we're making the psycho-neurobiological or mind, brain, body network strong. And that's enabling them to be able to know how to have the tools to know how to process what they are going through. So the neurocycle has had years of extensive hectic science, and I still do a lot of research and clinical trials and write scientific papers, but I've simplified a very complex process into brain preparation and 5 steps. And when you use this in 2 different ways, the one way is to build the brain and therefore to build resilience, and to teach a child how to really capture those healthy moments in their lives and really develop those. And then the other side is to recognize when they aren't feeling great, sadness, or if something's happened to them that shouldn't happen to them, that they have a way of talking about that and basically deconstructing and reconstructing it. So it's 5 basic steps. The first, before we start though, you've got to, and this will then goes to the whole thing of strengthening the mind. So all the steps together that you do in sequence are very important, because they work to, if you just do 1 or 2, or you do them haphazardly, or you do bits and pieces, you won't have that same change structurally in the mind, brain, body connection. And then you can fall back into old patterns. So in order to create a habit, to create a change, there needs to be a very planned and guided process, because that's just how your brain and mind work. It requires a lot of change. And you think of it, if you go like learning to eat correctly, you're not going to experience the change straight away. It takes time once you change your diet for your body to heal. It's the same principle. Once you've changed your mind diet, it takes time for the mind, brain, body network to heal. If you have a surgery, it takes time for the surgery. So we all understand that principle, but somehow when it comes to the mind, there's like we want a quick fix. There isn't. There's no quick fix. So helping a child recognize these signals and all that stuff is all part of this neurocycle. So if I quickly maybe walk you through the process very simplistically with an example, I think that may help. Shall I do that?
Yeah. What are the 5 steps?
Okay, so first of all, the 5 steps are to gather awareness, reflect, write, recheck, active reach. Before you start the 5, you need to prepare your brain. Child's has come home from school and something's happened, or child's in a fight with a sibling or whatever, your neurophysiology is out of whack. So your chemistries of neurochemicals are flowing all over the place, your energy in your brain, your heart's palpitating. You want to calm that down first. And that's called brain preparation. So before you start the 5 steps, it's always a good idea to do a brain preparation, which includes things like what we all know about breathing, meditation, whatever you want to do. I put a whole lot of ideas in the book. I have an app as well called the Neurocycle app, and we have a parent add-on being put into there. So it's for adults, but then we've got the app's for adults, but we're putting a little add-on that you can use if you have children. So that's an option that you've got to do something extra. So there's lots of examples in the book and that of brain preparation. So just a simple little breathing exercise, like breathe in for 3, out for 7, or just let's close our eyes and imagine a beautiful rainbow, or something. Let's just there's you can think of if they're able to count. You could do the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 exercise. Let's focus on 5 things you can see, 4 things you can hear, 2, 3 things that you can, so you go down in using the 5 senses.
So the breathing exercise, that's for the parent or for the child?
Together. They do it together.
Okay, I was going to say the parent may need to prep themselves too to make sure they're calm when they're dealing with this. Yeah.
So if you take thank you for pointing that out. You take a step back for a moment from the actual neurocycle. The best way to teach your child how to build resilience, strengthen their mind, cope with mental health, etc., and life is for you to be able to do it for yourself and to model that for your child. I mentioned in the beginning that children are very, they read body language and they read authenticity. So the best way for you to help your child is for you to help yourself. So you learn the neurocycle for yourself and then you model that for the child. So if you have a bad day and you come in and you yell at the kids and you whatever, or have a fight with your husband or wife or whatever, you can turn around and say, oh my gosh, I'm so sorry. I was mad. First emotional warning signal. I felt my whole shoulders tensed up, bodily sensation. I yelled at a behavior and a perspective. I had an awful day. Today's just an awful day for me. Perspective. So in a few seconds you've labeled, then that's the first step, gather awareness. So gathering awareness, I'll demonstrate it with the parent first, and then we can talk about the child. So the first step is to gather awareness. So you identify those 4. But prior to doing that, before you do that, it would have been a good idea when you lost your cool to just for a second close your eyes and do a bit of breathing or something like that, or breathing or visualization or whatever you feel like doing. There's a million techniques out there, and I give you lots of options as well in the book and in my app and in there's a book called Cleaning Up Your Mental Mess, which you mentioned as well, which is for adults, okay, to help yourself with the neurocycle. So just do some kind of brain prep. Then you'd go into the gather awareness, which is those 4. As I said, I'm mad, whatever, I just explained it. Then you would actually say why. You'd ask yourself, why am I feeling this? But out loud to your child, you'll be saying, I did this. You've asked why in your head. I did this because I've just had such a stressful day and it's just been a lot of things building up, or whatever language is appropriate for the age of your child. Then you're going to go to your little designated spot in the house. If you haven't already walked there, it's a good idea to do this whole thing in that area, walk towards it, sit down. Then if you've got a wall painted with chalk and paint, then you can pick up a piece of chalk and you could maybe draw a little face with an upside down smiley and put the word sad next to it, or angry or frustrated, even if they're not literate yet. Just seeing the word letter, sound letter association is great because you're teaching them about reading, you're teaching them vocab. So there's a bunch of other stuff going on here. You've also created a deep, meaningful collaboration because you're explaining to them what's going on with you so they don't think it's them. You are honoring them by them seeing into your life. That builds tremendous trust. I mean, there's a million things going on here that are phenomenal for your relationship with your child, as well as telling the child, hey, it's okay to have these feelings and these big sensations in my body, and there's a way of dealing with it. And even my mom or my dad or whatever battles. So then you would go there and maybe draw that little face or whatever, and you'd find at that point children will. It's amazing. I used to do a lot of family therapy with this system, and it's amazing how the child will lean in at that point. They may observe, but you've got their attention, and they'll often come up and maybe draw a word or draw a little picture. Do you feel like this, mommy? So they start interacting. Then you go into the 4th step and say, you look at what's been written down. Just, throw. The third step is very important, that you just throw things out there, draw some pictures, write some words. You may even pick up Brainy and demonstrate it. A child who can't draw right yet, they can, that's third step. There could be a dramatization. They could, you could pick it up and say, I see Brainy's got a sore tummy and Brainy's sad. And so you can transfer what the child's doing to the toy and then invite the child to demonstrate, I wonder what's wrong with Brainy. So that enactment stage is the third stage, where the brain does a lot of genetic writing. It does a lot of collapsing of energy and a whole bunch of great stuff. And it creates a potential for neuroplasticity, which is change is actually taking place in the right direction. Then the fourth step, you just say, you look at what you've written and drawn, or drawn on the notepad, or wherever, with the little dramatization you've done, and you'll say, oh my goodness, now this has happened. What do you think I can do about this? And, you can, at age appropriate, maybe as for an older child, you can say, maybe I can maybe work less, or I can take more breaks, or I can, they might pop up and say, I can put my toys away. Will that help you, Mom? And you can start this has happened. What can we do about it? I don't want to shout anymore. I don't want to get worked up like this. I maybe need to talk to my boss at work. So you start showing the child that you are reconceptualizing, looking at it through a different lens. You're making a plan. This is happening. I've got to do something. I've got to live with this, but let me try and make a plan. And then you end with the active reach. And the active reach is a little action that ends a cycle. Your brain, mind, body network works in cycles of tension, release, tension, release. So the brain preparation starts the cycle, then gathering awareness, reflect, write, recheck, brings the cycle. And then as you do the active reach, it closes the cycle. Then the cycle starts again. So we need to close. If we close, it's open-ended. So we need to close with a little affirmation, activity. So it could be something like, wow, this is great. Thank you for helping me. Let's go and cook dinner together. Or let's go for a walk together. Or let's read our favorite story. Or let's watch a show together. Just to, something fun to do. Or it could be just a statement that you write on the board, something on a piece of paper. I'm going to fix this. Something as simple as that. There's a plan I can make, or I'm not bad, or something like that. Sometimes it needs to be some kind of affirmation towards yourself, whatever, but you've just demonstrated to the child the oxygen mask principle. Put the oxygen on yourself, then you can put the oxygen on your child. So if you've demonstrated that, now let's say your kids are having a huge fight and the same scenario plays out and you've done this whole thing and you've calmed down. Now you say, okay, now I'm calm, so I won't yell at you kids. Now let's talk about the fight that you're having. Let's do a neurocycle with, why were you having this fight? So then you sit them down in that little space or whatever, or wherever they are, but you angle towards that area, and then you say, okay, let's talk about our emotions. Johnny, how are you feeling? So whatever, whoever's involved, if it's an individual, if it's more the siblings, and you walk through the 5 steps. So you started with yourself, and then you've given them permission to tune into themselves, and there's no threat. That you've created a safe space where no matter how I show up, I'm okay. It's not, there's a reason, and we're going to work out this reason. And even my mom battles, and even my dad battles. So you've created a whole different environment versus, I'm Gen X. I grew up with, you just got into trouble. You were sent to your room. You didn't talk about your emotions and feelings. You buried your head in the sand story. And that's not healthy, because those are real things that happen. You as a parent may think that child, sibling taking your toy, that's just, don't be selfish, let them play with your toy. That may not mean anything to you, but for that child, it means something. And
it's huge. Yeah.
It's huge. And you don't, even though you are the parent, you can't get in their head. Their experience is not your experience. So we must never assume we understand that experience and belittle, even though we try and sometimes encourage as parents and think it's not so bad. For them, it is so bad. So it's rather better to say, I see this really upset you. It's made you very, very angry. You want to hit your brother. You even try to hit your brother. Now, we can't hurt each other. That's all this energy in you that's making you mad. Let's rather squish Brainy and get our energy out. Or and I give lots of little options when that energy builds up and they want to do something like that. You can have a bucket full of things that are safe, that won't cut them, and they can throw it in the bucket and they can break something. And, something that's not, if it's sharp, be careful of sharp things, obviously, but there's ways of them, even
letting their emotions out. Yeah. Constructive.
Exactly. Have some soft toys that
Hmm.
throw against a wall so it doesn't create damage, but you let them get that. That can also be a brain prep exercise. If they're so angry you can't even talk to them, they can decompress by, let's take this energy, let's get rid of this energy first, and then let's
Hmm.
come and do a neurocycle.
Yeah. Well,
You
I was going to say when I was like probably in my teenage years, like young teenage, I would get mad and I would scream into a pillow and then I felt better,
know,
right? But no one could, yeah, it was just like a big scream into a pillow, totally fine. And I was like, okay. Then I just like went on with my day.
that's excellent because you transferred that energy, and that's so often, if you'll find that it kind of. I love that you gave that example because it takes that feeling of being out of control, which is so disempowering. It takes it away and it empowers you, and now you're ready to do the next step. And basically, what I wanted to say, which is so important, is if we liken this neurocycle to flying a plane. And I'm not saying that everyone flies a plane, but we all understand planes fly, and we all know that they don't just take off. The pilot and the co-pilot and the engineer, and there's a lot of preparation, the air tower, there's a lot of preparation that goes into it. So see the preparation to fly as being the brain preparation. Then see the gather awareness of the four signals being the takeoff. Now, here's a really important thing. In our current day and age, we really encourage a lot of I feel. There's a lot of things, programs at schools, and there's a lot of books that you can buy about. And a lot of parents are very aware of getting a child to talk about how they're feeling. Excellent. But the problem is, if you just do brain prep, like if you just do breathing or mindfulness or whatever, and then that alone is a problem. It's got to be put within. You've got to go beyond. And if you just do the brain preparation and gather awareness, and you don't do anything else, it's a problem because what you do is you take off. So you bring everything into the conscious mind. But if you don't know what to do with it now, you're going to crash. And that's what the research is showing. If we just get our kids to name their emotions, or an adult to name their emotions, or just to do meditation, it's a band-aid on the wound and they actually can get worse. So there's a lot of, there's like a boomerang effect. So you've got to also fly the plane. So that pilot needs to know how to fly the plane. So the flying of the plane would be the equivalent of the reflect, the right, and the recheck. And then the active reach is to land the plane. So it's to take these cycles. Now kids relate to that. Brainy's taking off and Brainy's flying. And there's so many analogies you can bring in, and kids get this. Kids get analogies. They love the brain. I mean, I would teach 2 and 3. I'd go into these sessions with group sessions with the brain and show the kids the brain, and show them trees and thought trees. And I've given you all that in the book with pictures that you can use. And we're bringing out a whole series of toys. Initially, now we've got Brainy and we've got the coloring book and so on. But you don't have to wait for me. You can go in your garden and point out a beautiful tree and an ugly tree, and so that's what happy and sad experiences look like. Or your child's really upset and you're driving home and you see a tree that's kind of all leaves are falling off and it looks kind of damaged. You can say, do you feel like, have you got one of those trees in your head at the moment? Those kind of contact points help a child to get the stuff out. You're giving them the tools to tell their story, which is huge in terms of what we said right in the beginning, how that carries through into adolescence and adulthood.
Yeah, great tips. And they're all in your book that everyone should get, by the way. And now that we are coming into back to school, which is crazy already, I want to just touch a little bit on, how do you suspect if your child is a victim of bullying at school? And how do you know? Because often a child won't just come and say, hey, I'm being bullied at school. They'll probably hide it. So what are some tips to help distinguish that?
I'm very glad you brought that up because that's actually someone was actually asked in an interview. They actually said my child's being bullied, and I think they've been bullied, but I'm not sure, and then described the behavior. So basically, if you look at the 4 signals, someone who's been bullied, and everyone reacts differently, but in general, you're going to see emotions like anger. And because they have had anger shown towards them, so that anger, they don't know what to do with it. So it's because it's so unfair, it can come out as anger. So suddenly your child may be more angry. They may also physically, so there's emotional warning signals. You may also see a lot of sadness because and then a lot of anxiety. So anger and anxiety, I would say, are the 2 top ones to look out for, especially if there's a change of pattern. So if your child is suddenly changing. And suddenly there's an anger that wasn't there before. There's a normal amount of anger that we all have. But if there's a persistent pattern of anger, persistent pattern of anxiety, those would be the top two that I would look for. And then sadness. And depending on how bad the bullying, how long it's been going on, you could even have levels of depression and that increasing. And think of it on that scale again. Think of it, is this just a normal little wiggle that I need to sort of watch? Or is it actually tipping? Is this now a pattern? Is it starting to tip? Then the other thing in terms of that's emotions, in terms of behaviors, that's where they may take it out. Like you may suddenly find them being nasty to a younger sibling. So the very action that happened to them, you may see happening to their child. So in the particular example of the person who just recently interviewed me, it's two stepbrothers, and the one is much older. One is I think 6 or 7, and the other one's like 2. And they normally have a great relationship. Back at school, this child comes home and starts actually hurting his brother, like pushing him and bullying that. And the mom knew there was something. So there was a change in a behavioral pattern, and that was fairly aggressive. So when you start seeing aggressive physical or maybe verbal behavior, saying things that you've never heard them say before, and you think, where's this coming from? Because your first reaction is, don't do that, that's bad, and to discipline. So yes, obviously you don't want them to hurt each other. You have to say, we don't do this. But and it's a situation of saying, you don't hurt your brother, you don't hurt your sister, you don't say those kinds of words. But I do understand that these words and these things you're doing are coming from somewhere. So let's go sit in our little medical place, or our neuropsychal mind place, and let's sort that out. But first of all, you can't hurt your brother. That's not done.
Sure.
You physically hurt. So we need to say, sorry, I need to sort out. He's crying, he's sore, she's sore. You need to go wait there. And that's not right. So you balance it. And yes, sometimes it's not always so easy to be very calm, because it might be that they really are. You might have to really separate them or something.
Yeah.
That's the intensity, especially the shift, especially when there's been, a sudden shift and change. Not sleeping at night, bedwetting, where, those kinds of things, nightmares. That's a very big clue. Nightmares are a very big clue, that because your mind, when you go to sleep, your unconscious mind is sorting out what's happened during the day. And if they haven't been able to express it, that energy in the proteins and things is all like a Vitamix, think of a Vitamix. It's shaken up and whatever. So if it's not resolved during the day, it'll come out in the nightmares. So that's a good place to let's talk about what your nightmare was. And
so what about some questions to ask your child? Because if you're seeing some of these signals, and so you don't want to just be like, hey, little Johnny, like, are you being bullied at school? How do you really approach it in a way that they would actually tell you? Because if you just flat out ask, are you being bullied at school? They're most likely going to say no. So how do you get them to tell you?
Very often you're going to have to say, if you suspect it, you could demonstrate it. You could pick up 2 toys and you could have demonstrate one bullying another one. You could demonstrate a scenario. You could count pictures. This is where if you have 4 boxes that you'd build up over time, where you have lots of pictures cut out of the 4 different emotional warning signals. And in there, you could have pictures of bullying. In the coloring book, I have an image of bullying that you could point to. So in other words, what I'm saying, have some tools in your toolbox that you can then say, look at this over here. This little boy is bullying this little girl. This is not really nice. That's not a nice. That's making this little boy or this little girl very sad. So it's a demonstration and verbalization of what you're demonstrating to try and draw them in, to give them the ways to explain that. You could also, depending on how you could you could also draw a picture. You could start drawing a picture of maybe someone with a loud shouting mouth or hands pushing, something like that. You could get them to draw and say that you don't want to talk. Do you want to draw some pictures for me? Do you want to draw how you're feeling? Do you want to show me how you're feeling? So you can ask that kind of thing. So it's not.
What about someone? Go ahead.
So it's not directly asking them, but it's more a demonstration. You could also, just to go around the corner, if they're verbal and you want actual words, which you can parallel with it, it's going to be things like something's different. Is there something that happened at school, or are you scared of something, or are you scared of someone? Sometimes when I was little, this happened to me. You demonstrate a story that happened to you about bullying, even if you have to make it up, or something that you saw. Oh, you saw this film about this. So in other words, you just model the language. So it's not directly asking, but you're creating scenarios through like stories, demonstration, pictures, to try and see if something connects with them, and then they're able to then start telling it back to you. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, totally. And I love that and that example of you sharing an experience that you had, and maybe they could relate. And I feel like my question was just a bit ago was, what about a child that's maybe 8, 9, 10 years old, and they're kind of past that stage of little toys or expressing things in that you would for maybe a 5-year-old or something like that. That's a great example that you just brought up, is mimicking or sharing an experience that you had that they can kind of relate to. And what about, would you say that you should just go to the teacher and say, hey, look, I suspect they're being bullied. Could you maybe pay attention and see, if that's true, and maybe just go to the school?
That's a really good place to start, because they're the ones that are with your child all the time. So sometimes you just need to make them aware, because kids are really clever at how they do this. And kids are very smart. And if, we always know if a child's bullying another child, they're being bullied. So somewhere in their environment, they're either being bullied by someone else at school or a sibling or at home, or, there's something going on. So it's really important that the environment where they are the most, which would be the school environment, is made aware that something's going on. And so then it's a matter of that's a matter of them observing and seeing what is happening. And there's a scenario that I can it was with a patient of mine when I practiced. This is going back a few years, because I stopped practicing quite a few years ago. But it's as you were describing that example, that, as you said, that question, it just popped back in my mind of a situation of a child that was a new child at school and picked on, like the bullies will do, someone who is, it always seems to be the sort of weaker one, or the one who's maybe doesn't speak up as much, or one who maybe answers all the questions. So they're kind of a little bit of a teacher's pet. Anyone who seems to be that they're vulnerable. And it turned out, that that child was being terribly bullied by the father, and they had to get social services in and everything. But it was coming out on the children at school, but it was very, very subtly done. So, even though the child was not even, I think the child was 6 or something, it was so adult-like, the bullying, so once the parents were made aware, and the teachers had started seeing something, but then the parents started coming in and talking. So yeah, for sure, it's really important to whoever's, maybe you've got a babysitter, maybe they go to daycare, maybe it's happening in the sports environment. So you may need to speak to the coaches, that it happens maybe in different scenarios. Maybe there's an after-school care place that they're going to. Those, wherever you're going to have to maybe speak, if they're in multiple different environments, ask.
Yeah.
They are being cared for by maybe a neighbor or a grandparent. Maybe there's something going on that's, it's worth investigating. It's, as we know, sexual abuse and these kinds of things are very often are done by people that we know.
Yes, it's very unfortunate, but it's it's always good to just be aware. Now, last question, because this is very interesting. Now, what is messy parenting, and why should we embrace it?
So I love that question. Well, my book is called Cleaning Up the Mental Mess, this book, and my previous one, and my podcast. So Cleaning Up the Mental Mess, the concept is that as humans, we are messy. Parenting is messy. You are dealing with human beings that are their own being. So they're unpredictable. And there's this whole dynamic being a parent and a child that's actually messy as well, because every moment of every day you're changing, and so is the child. And these new scenarios coming on the scene all the time. So the messiness is when you yell because they're driving you crazy, is not to, oh gosh, go into these, sort of cycles of guilt where you feel so bad, and then you end up, overcompensating and child pleasing, and then you can create narcissistic type tendencies, and because you do the, you feel so guilty that you overcompensate and that kind of thing. That's not teaching your child anything. So messy parenting it's telling yourself it's okay to be a mess. I do not have to, my life is not this curated Instagram life, which, there's so many great parent things out there, but they can also make you feel awful, because you see, oh, she's doing so much with her child, he's doing so much with his child, I'm not doing half. You find your own thing, like about bio-individuality in the body. You need to find your own bio-individuality in your parent-child relationship. So messiness is inevitable, because we're human. We're humans. It's okay to be a mess. What we've got to do is manage the mess. So their child comes home and they're frustrated. It's messy. It's okay. Let's manage the mess. We don't stay a mess. That's the authenticity part of it. So, oh gosh, you yelled, whatever. Instead of going and hiding and pretending everything's fine, it's sit down and tell them, I did this wrong. I'm sorry I said those things. Let them tell you the impact. When you said that to me, Mommy, it really made me feel sad. It really hurt my feelings. And you can listen and tune in and say, I'm so sorry. I can see that hurt your feelings. And that, that's messiness being resolved. So that's the thing. I felt the need to, and I did a podcast and everything on this. I felt the need to share this. And I'm so glad you raised this question, because we do live in a very social media curated society. And if you don't manage that as parents, we're going to feel terrible, because really what works, I give you general principles. You have to work out within that what is going to, that sequence. That's why what I've given you is a system for how you can create change in the mind, brain, body network, so that you can empower a person to show up differently. You can't change what's happened to them. You can't change the fact that they were bullied or whatever, but you can change what it looks like inside their mind, brain, and body, and therefore how it plays out into the future. And that empowerment process is very messy. It's very experimental. It's very working this out. It takes time. So don't think that 1 year cycle, my child must be fine, or compare your kids to other kids. That's the worst thing. Don't compare yourself to other people or your kids to other people. Rather just look for, if you see someone doing something great or someone has a great parenting tip, take that tip with a pinch of salt and say, how would this look in my life? And how would it play out in my child's life? Because something that really works really well for someone may not work very well for you. Whatever you want to change, though, make sure you put it into the correct framework, which is the neurocycle framework, so that the child can be empowered to manage their own mind, and that you'll get the change they're not going to get stuck, that they can move forward.
That's a great note to leave on. Thank you so much, Caroline. And if you guys don't know, this is your 19th book.
Yes.
19th book, and it's how to help your child clean up their mental mess. Thank you again for coming on. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you so much, Bethany. You asked great questions. I really enjoyed it. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thanks for listening to this episode of Digest This. If you enjoyed this episode, please leave a review in your podcast app to let us know. If you're ever wondering how you can support me and this podcast, sharing it with your friends and family is the best way. This is a Resonant Media production produced by Drake Peterson and edited by Mike Fry. To email the show, message us at digestthispod@gmail.com. See you next time. The content of this show is for educational and informational purposes only. It is not a substitute for individual medical and mental health advice and does not constitute a provider-patient relationship. As always, talk to your doctor or health team first.
Looking to build a more robust foundation in your health and well-being? From the producer of Digest This comes one of the most popular alternative health shows on Apple Podcasts, The Dr. Tina Show. Dr. Tina Moore is a naturopathic physician and chiropractor, traditionally and alternatively trained in science and medicine. The show features exclusive interviews with experts such as Sean Stevenson, Mike Mutzel, Mark Groves, and even solo episodes covering metabolic health, pharmaceuticals, chronic diseases, long hauler syndrome, and pain management. Dr. Tina delivers the information in a no-nonsense, real-world style, and she has the science to back it up. The Dr. Tina Show is edgy, entertaining, and informative. Every episode will leave you with a new pearl of health wisdom to expand your knowledge base. When you're empowered, you can do better for yourself, your family, and your community. Resilience is the name of the game, and Dr. Tina is here to guide you on your way. Listen to The Dr. Tina Show today on your favorite podcast app. New episodes every Wednesday. Produced by Drake Peterson and Resonant Media.